Sameach.
Hag Sameach. I think we can welcome everybody who's on YouTube now, and for those who are joining us on Zoom, we'll welcome you to the screen as well.
Welcome, friends, the Zoomiverse and the YouTuberverse and beyond. As we come to this close of the first week of Pesach, a big week on the belly. Well, right, I meant the first week of the Sfirat HaOmer, of the counting of the Omer, which is, the first week is Pesach. Thank you. Indeed. So we are just nearing the end of this first week of the Sfirat HaOmer, which we'll hear more about later. Shabbat Shalom. Hi. We're going to start with this intention to build the world first from Chesed. Olam Chesed Yibane, Yadai, Yadai, Yadai. Olam Chesed Yibane, Yadai, Yadai, Yadai. Olam Chesed Yibane, Yadai, Yadai, Yadai. Olam Chesed Yibane, I must build this world from love. And you must build this world from love. And if we build this world, and if we build this world from love, then God will build with us. Then God will build this world. God will build this world. Olam Chesed Yibane, Olam Chesed Yibane. One last time. Olam Chesed Yibane, Olam Chesed Yibane.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
In my household, we've recently gotten into Disney Plus. We've reached that age now. And so for the first time, I watched with Lev and Amalia the Frozen movie. Now, if you've never seen it before, you probably have heard the music. It's one of those movies that I would say more than anything else gets stuck in your head, especially when Elsa sings Let It Go. And I was thinking about the movie as I was driving over here, and specifically about that song and what it is that's kind of captured the imagination of those who listen to it. I think that there is something about the ability to let it go, the ability to understand that despite all of the challenges around you, sometimes you just want to release. You don't want to hold on anymore. That I think is the same compelling thing that makes Shabbat so important for all of us. The ability to have 6 days where we hold on, where we hold fast. And then, in Elsa's words, one day to let go. One day to just be. One day to just relax into what is. Your goal today is to do just that. Yes, it's a holiday. Yes, we are ending Passover over these next few days. But what I will say, more than anything else, is that take these 25 hours of Shabbat to let go of all of the stuff that you're holding on to. And when you do that, you will find that Shabbat does the cleansing work that each of us hope and expect for it to do. So we're going to usher in Shabbat formally in a moment. But before I do that, just a few announcements to make sure that we all feel very comfortable and welcome. If you didn't get a prayer book, you can find it right at the front. Today we're actually using the thick prayer book. So if your prayer book says Shabbat on the binder, it's not going to work because it's a holiday and we've got a special set of prayers that we are using. In addition to that, kippot, if you want, are available at the front. Bathrooms are located out the main door and to the right, though we have all gender and accessible bathrooms located both in the main office and downstairs. And if you're nursing, feel free to use my office, which will afford you a level of privacy. If you need assistant listening devices, those can be found right outside, and our usher can direct you to them. And if for any reason you're having trouble understanding us because we're speaking too quickly or not using the mic well enough, I'll invite you to just raise your hand, interrupt us. We always want to do better. In addition, I want to introduce our usher, who's Larry Unger right there. He can help you with anything else that you might need. Finally, it is all of our responsibility to make sure that everyone who walks through this door feels welcome. So make a point to introduce yourself to someone new. And if you see someone a little lost in services, don't hesitate to help them find their place. So with all of that in mind, we're now going to usher formally in Shabbat as we move to page 120 and 121. And tomorrow, in a special service, Sophie will be becoming bat mitzvah. And so in honor of that, I want to invite her with her immediate family up to light our candles and to lead us in Kiddush.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Turn the page.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hina hilanu zikaron l'maaseh bereshit ki hu yom tehillah lemikra'e kodesh zeher letziat mitzrayim kivanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodsheha ve'ahava uvratzon hinhatanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
Good job. Take a sip. All right, and you can take a seat.
Well done.
So take a nice deep breath and think, Pesach was 1 week ago. Actually, the second night of Pesach was. And Matt's going to put up some slides so that we can actually mark this time. And I noticed when I was sitting over there that they were a little on the fuzzy side. So it reminds me of something my father used to say, just squint and it won't look so fuzzy. It's okay? Okay. So we say together, Hineni mucha umetzuman lekayem mitzvat aseh shel sfirat haomer. I, not me, I, all of us, are ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer. So we count the day, Hayom Shiva Yamim, Shehem Shavua Echad LaOmer. Today is 7 days, which is 1 week of the Omer. And each time we count the Omer, each day that we count it, we take an introspective look at some of those internal pieces of ourselves. And today is marked by Malchut Sheb Chesed, nobility within loving kindness. So I ask you, and listen carefully, mature love comes with and brings personal dignity, an intimate feeling of nobility and regality, knowing your special place and contribution in this world. Any love that is debilitating and breaks the human spirit is no love at all. For love to be complete, it must have the dimension of personal sovereignty. Take a deep breath. Think of an aspect of your love that has bolstered your spirit and enriched your life, and celebrate it. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. We're going to move now, page 138, as we move into the singing of L'Chadodi, and we formally usher in Shabbat through prayer.
B'nei Shabbat nekabe, ya la 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 l'chad dodi, elai elai elai, ya la 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 likrat kala, ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad hishmi'anu el hamiyuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad l'shemo tiferet veli techila
Let's hear you.
ya la la ya la 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 l'chad dodi la 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 ya la 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 likrat
Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Likrat Shabbat לכוון לך כי מקור הברכה
שמקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה יאללה יאללה לך דודי יאללה
לקראת כלה
יאללה בני
שבת פני שבת נקבלה
התעוררי, verse 5 התעוררי כי באורך קומי אורי אורי שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה
Let's hear you.
יאללה לך דודי יאללה
לקראת כלה יננננאי פני שבת פני שבת נקבלה We rise facing the door.
Verse 9 בואי ושלום עטרת בלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה יאללה לך דודי יאללה
לקראת כלה יאללה פני שבת
פני שבת לקרא יאללה לך דודי
יאללה לקראת כלה יאללה פני שבת נקבלה We remain standing, page 146.
Join us. ברכו את אדוני המבורך
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
We're seated together. We're on the top of page 149. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars, creator of the tide of time and light. You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'ma'ariv aravim. Page 150.
Ahava
כולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת.
תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת.
על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו
וקומנו, נשיח בחוקך,
ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך
לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו באורך ימינו, באורך ימינו, ובהם נגה יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה.
ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
Page 154.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני
אדוני אלוהיכם.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
In a moment, we're going to turn to page 158 and join together in the singing of Mi Chamocha. Now, what you may not realize is that Passover actually builds in joy every single day. Now, why is that? Because actual Passover, right, the first day of Passover, doesn't commemorate the freedom of the Jews from Egypt. It actually commemorates, as horrible as it sounds, the death of the firstborn. It commemorates the 10th plague. And it takes 7 days to get from that 10th plague to eventually walking across the sea into freedom. Today begins what is, or really today was, the 7th day of Passover, which is the anniversary of the Jews crossing that sea to freedom. And although, if you remember, the story seems to begin with that semblance of joy of leaving, the anticipation builds and builds until it culminates, until it climaxes exactly at this moment that we are sitting in today. Which means that if we really take seriously the idea of Bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim, that in every generation we have to live as if we were freed personally from Egypt, then that means that today is that day to really feel it and to really celebrate. We're on page 158, singing that song that the Israelites sang about 3,500 or so years ago as they crossed the sea today.
And they, of course, had Ed playing with them. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha נאמר בקודש, נורא תהילות, אוסף למלכותך, ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה אלי אנו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי אדוני את יעקב וגלום יתחזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל.
Page 160, or you can turn your attention to the screen.
Na na na. Oh, that's not the one we're doing. Now I know what it is. Hashkivenu ya Eloheinu li shalom. May I know this peace as I lie down. Hashkivenu ya Eloheinu li shalom. Keep that going. Hashkivenu
Hashkivenu ya Eloheinu
shlomecha
Hashkivenu ya Eloheinu
shlomecha. One last time.
Hashkivenu ya Eloheinu shalom.
ברוך אתה אדוני הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
On page 164, and after this opening meditation, we'll move into silence as we pray the traditional words on the page or the words in our hearts through page 180. We rise together.
Adonai שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to interrupt our Amidah because I actually pointed us toward the wrong pages. Although it is Shabbat, it is, as I mentioned, also a holiday. And so the correct pages for the silent Amidah actually begins on page 470 if you want to pray the festival Amidah. There are some additions and some changes to the middle of the prayer.
invite you, if you are still praying privately, to continue. Let the sounds of our communal prayer of peace just wash over you. And for the rest of us, we continue page 488 as we lift up our voices with our prayer for peace. Page 488.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amecha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amecha tasim leolam. V'tov benecha v'tov be'enecha livarech et amecha Yisrael b'chol rit ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
I love that each time we gather together in prayer, we have this opportunity to not pray for ourselves, but to pray for others, in particular, those in need of healing. And I'll ask you to join me on page 511. And I will also ask, keep those names of the people you're thinking of in your hearts and minds. And when it's time, you'll also see up on the screen the names that we have on our Mishaberach list. Mishaberach avotenu v'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech et hacholim. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. And I ask, if you'd like to say the names out loud. Miriam, go on. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. And let us say, Amen. Please join me. Mishaberach avotenu mekor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha liavotenu. Tenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. So it was actually not staged that I forgot to announce the page number to the festival Tefillah, the festival Amidah. Though in fact, what I'm going to talk about tonight is the fact that there are many synagogues around the country that don't treat tonight like a holiday. And I want to talk about the tension and the difference and almost see it as a microcosm to better understand Reform Judaism and the way to do Reform Judaism correctly in understanding the tension of how you figure out whether tonight is a holiday or not. Now, a little bit of Judaism 101 to bring you up to speed. Traditionally, Passover is 7 days long. However, if you live in the diaspora, if you live in the area of the world that is not Israel, anywhere from ancient Babylonia to New Jersey, we add an extra day to the holidays. And the reason why that is because in the ancient world, the way that the holiday would be calculated would be that someone would stand in the midst of Jerusalem, they would look up, they would see a new moon. And in seeing that new moon, they would declare a new month. But because it takes a while for news to travel, to be safe, the diaspora, the community not in Israel, adds an extra day. And so the first day of Passover is actually 2 days, which is why we've got 2 Seders. And the last day of Passover is actually 2 days, which is why it's 8 days long rather than 7. Now, in choosing this, there's a little bit of skin that everyone has in the game, because it's not just, at least on Passover, the question about are we going to pray the festival Amidah or the weekday Amidah. The skin in the game is if I keep Passover, if I don't eat bread, do I get to eat bread tonight or do I get to eat bread tomorrow night? Now, our community holds by the more strict standard. We always celebrate 8 days of a holiday, in part because in 1980, we were a merger between 2 synagogues, a Reform synagogue and a conservative synagogue, and we hold by, at least traditionally, a slightly more traditional Reform practice than you would find in mainstream Jewish life. It's the reason that all our potlucks are dairy, and that if we're going to have meat, it has to be kosher meat. It's the reason our kitchen is fully kosher. It's the reason we celebrate 8 days of a holiday. And in fact, once upon a time, we were actually dual affiliated with Reform and Conservative. And so we got kicked out of the conservative movement for being too good to interfaith families, which is exactly the reason we should be kicked out of any movement. But I want to play with this notion about what day it is. And I want to play around with it in order to give you a sense of how to do Reform Judaism right. Because whenever I speak to my students, I always tell them that the point of being a Reform Jew is not necessarily to go with the motions, not to take the easy way out. In fact, being a Reform Jew is harder sometimes than being other kinds and other streams of Judaism, because every decision deserves to be scrutinized over. Whether you keep kosher or you don't keep kosher, the thought that the expectation is that you're going to spend some time thinking about it, right? Whether you drive on Shabbat or don't drive on Shabbat, the expectation is that you're going to give that some thought. Whether or not you celebrate 7 or 8 days of a holiday, the expectation is that you've put the thought into it, which means that a Reformed Jew learns as much as he or she can and then agonizes over the decision, questions the decision, and goes back over and over and revisits that decision. It's exhausting, which is why many of us actually don't do Reform Judaism right. But the goal is to think. The goal is to question. and the goal is to revisit. Being Reformed means you have the option of celebrating 7 days or celebrating 8 days for Passover. You have the option of breaking tonight or breaking tomorrow. And because of that, it becomes all the more important to understand why you do what you do. Now, I'm not going to ask us who's eating pizza tonight and who's eating pizza tomorrow, though by all means, please come tomorrow night as we officially break, because we have a Turkish Muslim group coming to the synagogue to break with us because it's also Ramadan, and they'll be breaking their Ramadan fast at the same time. But I want to lay out a few potential answers you might give for why you might eat that pizza tonight, and a few potential answers for why you might eat that pizza tomorrow night, to help you figure out where you sit on the continuum and where you are as a Reformed Jew when it comes to 7 or 8 days. So let's start with 7. I'm going to give you a few reasons why 7 might be a good idea. The first of which is that we don't need to build in a buffer. We no longer, with the temple destroyed, sit in Jerusalem and look up and see that new moon and decide what we're going to do. Instead, we have things like astronomy. We have science, and that tells us exactly when the 15th day of the month of Nisan is going to fall. We don't need those external signs because we can calculate it. I could go to a website like hebcal.com, and I can tell you the date that Passover is going to begin in the year 2122. We know that. And so because of that, potentially, it becomes repetitive to choose that we are actually going to do that extra day. And maybe in a world that so questions science, saying that you're going to be on the side of science on that 7th day means that you are reacting against climate deniers, against those who refuse to get vaccinated. Because understanding the role that we live in today means we don't need some cosmic energy telling us when a holiday is going to fall. We can use our intellects and our brains. Another reason potentially to break tonight would be the idea that in Israel, Passover is only 7 days. And if you're going to be Zionist about it, maybe you decide that you are going to hold by what your brothers and sisters in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, and in Haifa are doing. Maybe it's a statement of your dedication to Israel that you are going to break then. Or maybe it's a sign about being a Reformed Jew. I told you, by the way, that Reformed Judaism is all about choice, but I will tell you that there are official movement policies. And officially, the movement only celebrates 7 days. And so maybe as a way to say, I am proud as a Reformed Jew, I'm going to hold by what the official Reformed position is, even well you know that it holds no weight whatsoever, and you as an individual are the ultimate authority because that's actually what being a Reformed Jew is all about. And maybe that's the reason that you're going to decide to hold those 7 days. Or maybe you've had enough of Passover. And 7 feels like a whole number, right? 7 being the days that the world was created in, and you decide to hold by that. I'll tell you, though, as a Reformed Jew myself, I hold 8 days. As compelling as all of those are, it doesn't speak to me enough to overshadow the reasons that I hold for those 8 days. And I want to speak for a moment about those. As compelling as the answer is about Israel, I have to say that there's a piece of me that my Zionism actually creates the need to go the extra day. Because I understand I'm not living in Israel. I'm not running to bomb shelters when there's a conflagration. I'm not serving in the army. I don't have the skin in the game in the way that my brothers and sisters in Haifa and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem do. And therefore, being in the diaspora is a statement for me. In addition, I'm a proud American Jew. I don't wish that I lived anywhere else. And so by being an American Jew, I don't see it as a punishment that I'm holding that extra day. Instead, I see it as a statement of who I am or what I am. The first prayer book ever written in America was by a rabbi whose name is Isaac Mayer Wise. And it was called Minhag America. The idea behind it was that we as an American Judaism are forging a new path forward. And in doing so, it's okay to hold by a certain standard in America because we are in America. Now, there are other reasons as well. There's a really important precept in Judaism, which you may implicitly know but not know of, which is called Al titosh Torat imecha. Do not abandon the Torah of your mother, literally. What that means is, it's a quote actually from the book of Proverbs, is that there's power in doing what your ancestors have always done. That, yeah, you might need to change here or there, but it's a statement of connection to the grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents who came before you to hold by those things. It, by the way, is the major reason why many people who live in America and are no longer really Ashkenazi Jews anymore still don't eat rice and beans and corn, because that connection to those ancestors who were truly Ashkenazi matters. Do not abandon the Torah of your ancestors. And because my family did 8 days, and because my grandparents did 8 days, and because their grandparents did 8 days, that's potentially a reason why I do it too. There are many others that I'm sure I'm not mentioning here. But what I'll say is that every single one of us has the sacred job, the sacred duty to mull over what we think the answer should be. Allow yourself to make those pro and con lists. Allow yourself to ask not just what intellectually makes sense, but what's meaningful to you. If you always do 7 days, sometimes try a year where you do 8 to see what it feels like. And if you always do 8 days, try a year where you do 7 and see if it's meaningful to you. Jewish practice, Reform Judaism done well, is a combination between what you intellectually think is going to matter to you and what in practice, once you get your hands dirty, really does. So whether or not you're eating bread tonight or tomorrow, whether or not Passover is 7 or 8 days, I hope you take this as the opportunity to practice what I think you should do always in your Jewish practice, which is to question, to think, to poke, to prod, and to revisit. Because in doing so, that's the way you live the fullest of Jewish lives. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to move now into Aleinu, and we rise together, page 586.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot adama, shelo samchelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam. V'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
We're seated together. This being a festival evening, we're going to take the opportunity to think of those who we love and who we've lost, but not just in the way that we would each Shabbat by reciting our list of names during Kaddish and then saying the prayer. But we're going to do a ritual that appears 4 times throughout the calendar. On Sukkot, on Passover, on Shavuot, and then in the afternoon of Yom Kippur. It's called Yizkor services. Yizkor, the root of which means to remember, to recall. And so we're going to turn to page 575 as we move into that brief service now to give us a platform to think of those who are no longer with us. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backwards or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey from birth to death to life everlasting. Page 576.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי, לא אחסר. בינות דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינחלני. נפשי שובב, ינחין ומגלה צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגצל מוות, לא ירא כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשנתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, אדישנת ושמן ראשי כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסר ירדפוני כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me to waters and places of repose. God renews my life. God guides me in right paths as befits God's name. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai for many long years. Page 578. I am ever mindful of Adonai's presence. God is my right hand, I shall never be shaken. So my heart rejoices, my whole being exalts, and my body rests secure. For you will not abandon me to Sheol or let your faithful ones see the pit. You will teach me the path of life. In your presence is perfect joy. Delights are ever in your right hand.
שיביתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד כי מימיני בל אמות לכן שמחתי בי ויגל כבודי אף בשרי ישכון לבטח Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mini bale mo.
Page 579, a poem by the poet Zelda. Each person has a name. We each have a name given by God and given by our father and mother. We each have a name given by our stature and smiles and given by our attire. We each have a name given by the hills and given by the walls. We each have a name given by the stars and given by our friends. We each have a name given by our sins and given by our yearnings. We each have a name given by our enemies and given by our love. We each have a name given by celebrations and given by our work. We each have a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. We each have a name given by the sea and given by our death. We turn to page 580. And with names on our tongues and names in our hearts, we remember the names of all of those who rest with us today. Those we want to invite into the room with us. Those who are already here. And so we'll take a moment in silence to pray the silent memorial prayer now. We turn together to page 582, and we rise for El Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim Shucheine ba'miromim Hametzeh menucha nechona tachat kanefei hashechina Im kiddushim utehorim Kezor harakim hazehirim Lenishmat yakireinu Shehalechu leolamam Polo rachamim yastirem besed kared alfav leolamim Bitror bitror hachayim et nishmatam Adonai yunar charatam v'yanuchu b'shalom al mishkavam v'nomar Amen.
Fully compassionate God on high, To our loved ones who has entered eternity, grant clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights and in the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings. Secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, they are yours. They will rest in peace, as together we say, Amen. I'll invite you to say the words, we remember them, after I read each line. In the rising of the sun and in its going down.
We remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter.
We remember them.
In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring.
We remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer.
We remember them.
In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn.
We remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends. When we are weary and in need of strength. When we are lost and sick at heart. When we have joys we yearn to share. So long as they live, we too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. I'll invite us to be seated for a moment. Because Shabbat, and this Shabbat specifically, is both about those who passed away long ago, some of whom we are observing and who might have been on our hearts, that died a generation ago, 2 generations ago. But we also understand that today is Shabbat, and therefore there are those here who are observing yard sites or who are observing recent deaths in their own lives or in our community. And so as I read each name, I'll invite you to rise, and then we'll join them standing at the end to all recite Kaddish for both those names mentioned and those names we were praying for earlier in the service. This Shabbat, we recall the following individuals: Ronald Abbott, Esther Keels Baff, Morris Becker, Blanche Bernstein, Ethel Bach, Herman Brown, Zita Berger, Harvey Komita, Fanchin Gattel, Norman Golden, Martha Henley, Martha Human, Samuel Kaplan, Milton Keels, Samuel Kosak, Herbert Kramer, Violet Lavenda, Louis Liebling, June Lind, Abraham Maltonfort, Benjamin Meyer, Luis Nazari, Jacob Nyworth, Lucille Pauley, Jan Penny, Ann Paulin, Harry Rabinowitz, Charles Reisner, Esther Rocklin, Shana Rosenberg, Leo Schneider, Edward Serlin, Hyman Small, David Spencer, Moritz Spitz, Rose Stelzer, Louis Tenen, Helen Tucker, Barbara Weiser, Sarah Zeisel, and Jared Zimmerman. And those who are in their Shiva and Shloshim periods of mourning: Marianne Kramer, mother of Chris Kramer, Lynn Adler, stepmother of Deb Alper, Quentin Palmer, son of Casey and Jack Palmer, Nan Barkan, aunt of Emily Goldberg, Miriam Schlang, mother of Nami Rotke, our member, Herbert Stein. And I announce the death of Robert Krentzman, who you should have gotten an email about earlier this week, husband of Barbara Krentzman. Funeral services will be Sunday at the Jewish Memorial Chapel, with a Shiva on Monday, April 25th, at the home of Rebecca and Daniel Wolf in Teaneck, New Jersey. You can find information about that online or come to me and I can give you the address. So if you've got other names of people that you're thinking about, names of people who died within this past year or who were yard sites that we might not have mentioned, whether family or friend, I'll invite you to share their names as my eyes go around the room. We turn to page 598, and we rise together. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, bi'amad divrach yirtei v'yamlech malchutei, בחיי אחון וביום אחון ובחיי תכל בית ישראל. בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירם ביומה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. We're
We're
seated
going to end
together.
with those few words. You can be seated again. Ose shalom. Ose
Shalom
bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imeru amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imeru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Chag
Chag
Sameach.
Sameach. So
Shabbat
tomorrow morning services are 10 a.m., our festival services. And then I want to wish Sophie Mazel Tov at 1 p.m. as she becomes Bat Mitzvah in a special ceremony here. Following that, if you want to break with us tomorrow night at 7:15, come join us. We have Peace Islands Institute, a Turkish Muslim group that's going to be breaking their Ramadan fast at the same time as we're breaking Passover here with us, and hopefully you can join us for that. There's lots of other stuff, but the challenge with a Friday night of Yizkor is there's not a perfect moment to give announcements. So just make a point and look at your emails and the website, and you'll see plenty going on here at the congregation.
Beautiful. And birds have just entered. And you know what? Tomorrow morning at 8:30, there's Torah study. And at 9 a.m., there's sacred chanting. Circle here in our building. So come, pray, join
Yes.
us, study.